This conference will now be recorded.
Anyway, thanks for joining the session. For those who don't know me, my name is Adam, and I'm a technical architect by profession and a trainer by passion. So, as I was saying, let's first understand what exactly is DevOps, and then we will see what organizations are expecting in this concept called DevOps, and what are the things that organization expect us to do in the DevOps, and how do you exactly do that? Okay, so that's how I'll be splitting up the whole session. Now, quickly, if you have gone through any of the old sessions or still if you're hearing it for the first time, regardless of what kind of organization do you work, you might be working for a service-based organization or a product-based organization. So what is that they look at the end of the day? They have to make sure that their customers are happy in terms of providing a service, in making sure that the applications or the machine is always available, or you are trying to sell a product for a customer. So in that way, as a business need, every organization focuses on certain points. Okay, so that is first, delivery. As I said, you might be working for Amazon, you might be working for Google, you might be working for Oracle or CTS or Infosys, whatever organization. So you make sure whatever has been committed to a customer or to an end user, you need to deliver it faster, correct? So that is where now delivery is not just you do it once. The immediate next time you get a new requirement and we have to start working on it. So that is where whenever a requirement comes, we need to make sure how fast are we delivering it to our customers or the end users who is going to access. Okay. Now, when we talk about continuous delivery, we also have to focus on quality. Okay, now let's say you all go to shopping on Amazon. Okay, and then as the products keep changing, you expect the pages to be appearing on the Amazon website. Now, what happens just because that the sale has opened and so many users are trying to access, if they made sure that the product page is displaying, but the quality of the picture, what they're displaying is not good, then you will still not be happy, right? The same way, anything that we are trying to deliver to our customers, if you're delivering it fastly, but if you're not delivering it with the expected quality, then it is of no use. So that is where the company's expectation is, along with how you deliver faster, you need to make sure the quality of whatever you're delivering, the service or the product, should also be higher. Now, when doing both, that is the time and the quality, when you're giving so much of importance, what happens? There's too much of cost that you have to put. What do you mean by cost? So cost here is, if a company has to make sure that they deliver faster and also quality is higher, if they put too much of people to work on that, or if they buy some software which is licensed and getting the help of it, then what happens? The cost of maintenance or production or delivery becomes higher. So that is where, when the cost becomes higher, whatever they are trying to sell or give the service will also be quite expensive. So that is where, to make sure the business is fine, the cost that has been put in all this maintenance and production should be lesser. Okay, so that is where what companies are focusing now is spend less. And that is where you hear all this cost cutting, right? Things happening. So anywhere unnecessarily they are spending, they want to reduce. It could be people, or it could be a process, or it could be a machine which is being unused. So everything is cost for an organization. And finally, in addition to all these things, there is something else called as outages. Now, all these things you might have not heard if you're into product organization, but what happens is, if you go more to a service based, or the same example of Amazon that I said, you are doing shopping and because of so much of load, something went down, or all of you in a company are trying to work on a product, develop and test, but some network outage happened or some software upgrade has to be done, right? Now, because of all these kind of things, if you stop your work, whether it could be an hour or whether it could be a day, then that is what we call it as outage. Now, depending on the business, the outage has to be as small as possible. Okay. Now, think about Amazon's website. If they go down even a minute when their sale is going on, then they are going to incur a huge loss, right? So that is where what companies are looking at is whatever kind of problem that they are facing, whether it could be upgrading a machine or a OS, or they are upgrading a software or an application or fixing some problem, they need to make sure how quickly they can find it and fix, so that the time that we take to fix a problem should also be less. So that is how the end users will be happy and you will be able to do continuous delivery with quality. Okay. So this is what in simple every organization is looking at. So now the next thing is, okay, now company has to achieve this goal. So now it is not sufficient that only developer should work or only QA guy should work or only system admin should work. Now every one of us have to work in such a way that a company can achieve that goal. So that's where now if you look at the company, you can broadly divide them into the kind of work they do. Okay, now you can divide them further, but on a broader scale, if you take the actual technical people, you can divide them into development group and operations group. So what do you mean by development group? Now, when I say development group, they are not just developers. These are the group of people who help in developing, testing, and releasing the product. That is what we call it as development group. Okay. So as you can see the slide, anyone who is directly working towards developing and releasing a product will be part of it. So that is where majorly developers, program managers, QA engineers, release engineers, build engineers, or support engineers who work on the release, all these people will be part of development group. On the other side, you will see people who are focusing completely on the infrastructure side, because for a company to run, we need few people to develop product and test, and few people to take care of the machines. So that is where the operation groups mainly consists of administrators who will be taking care of an application or a machine. And that's where you will see people like system admins, network administrators, database administrators, or middleware, or storage administrators, or deployment engineers. So anyone who is focusing on maintaining a machine or application will be in this. Now, why do we need to know? Because if you understand, you will be part of any one of this currently. And now what is the company looking at is all of us have to work together in such a way that a company can get the goal what they are looking at. Okay. So in the previous slide, we saw that 4 goals. Now, how is that a company can get? Company can achieve it only when all of us are working towards it. Because we call generally the SDLC as SDLC cycle, because even if one guy doesn't work, the entire product will not be delivered. Okay, it's just like a factory where if one person doesn't work, beyond that nothing will be going on. If a developer is not to write code fast, QA cannot test. If QA cannot test, you cannot have a deployment engineer working. If that guy is not working, you will not have a person working on the system administration to help you deploy or maintain. The same way, if a system admin is not giving enough machines or making sure whatever the problems you have is not fixed, you will not be able to develop or test or deploy. So that is where every one of us have to work together. Okay. Now, once again, this is what every company would be telling us, that you have to work together. But what else that we have to work in such a way company can achieve the goal? So that's where the solution which organization is thinking about is automation. Okay. So what automation? Next, what happened? If you're already working, you would have been understanding in the last couple of years, they will say that whatever work you do, they are focusing on automation. So that way, now what happens? When you say that you have to automate, everyone first thinks whatever you are working, that you have to automate. Correct? That is absolutely fine. But what organization is looking at is, if you automate only your work, still all the remaining work which is needed to deliver a product in your SDLC, has not been completed. So that is where the solution what organization is looking at is not just automating development work or testing work or deployment work or administration work of your system or database storage. Wherever you are working, you need to automate, but not just your work, but they are focusing in doing a automation end to end. So that end to end automation, which involves all of us to work together. Okay, so that is the reason they came up with a solution and they named it as DevOps. As the name says, development group and operation groups working together to achieve a business goal is what they call it as DevOps. Okay, so now if you understand DevOps, development group and operation group working together. So what is that you have to do? Whatever problems that you are facing, try to automate it in such a way that we can collaboratively get the result whatever is needed by a organization. Okay, so that is where now the next point came up is, can everyone implement it? Actually, this is the goal what an organization wants, but to get that it might take another couple of years. But right now what organizations are focusing on, they need people who, rather than just thinking about automating only their day-to-day work, they have to think about this way where we call it as a culture. So it's nothing but, rather than focusing on doing the same kind of work, you have to stand up and try to automate things which could be on both the groups. Okay, so regardless of which group you are in, your focus now should be is automating end to end, which could be a problem that you are solving in the development group side, or it could be a problem in the operation group side. So such a kind of culture is what organization wants everyone to do. So that is where if you look at every profile nowadays, they are adding more and more responsibility. Okay, so in simple, now if you understand, DevOps is nothing but a culture in which organization is expecting an individual not just to automate his current work, but think beyond it in an SDLC. What are the things that you might be doing? Because so far in your day, before doing your work, someone will complete and then give you the work, or you complete the work and give it to someone else and they will be doing their work. So in that way, think how you can do some automation which is on the left side or right side of your current work. Okay, so that's where you want to focus. So in this way, if everyone focuses, then there will be a lot of automation that we can do from end to end. So that is the simple solution what company is expecting. Once again, now if you are just being a developer or a system admin or a storage admin or a QA guy or a support guy, first you will be automating whatever is given, but what are the other things that you need to know? So that is where now, rather than calling yourself as a regular engineer, if you want to call yourself as a DevOps engineer, the first expectation what an organization is looking at is generalist. So generalist means, okay, you might be an expert in dev, you might be an expert in QA, you might be an expert in administration or supporting. Now, outside that, can you solve some other problem? And are you ready to solve those kind of problems? That is what the first expectation which an organization is looking at. So that is where, as I was telling, rather than focusing on just one work which you are doing and automating, in the name of DevOps, they are expecting to do more automation outside your current profile. So that is where you can think of doing some automation on development group as well as few things on administration group, or both the way. Okay, and then automation. Now what is that automation? So let me put it up in a simple example. See, in those days people used to hire maid. We used to have a maid for cooking separately, we used to have a maid for cleaning houses separately, right? We need to have a maid separately for washing. So this way there will be different maids. Now what is happening? We are getting one maid who can do all this work. Now how is that possible? Because there are so many automatic things available. right? For cooking, you have some automatic utensils. For washing, you have washing machine. You have fridge to store, right? And then you have mixer, grinder. There are a lot of things that can automate your work. So that is how a single person is able to do many things. The same way, if you go to a company and if you have asked to solve a problem in the development side, testing side, and administration side, how will you do all those things in the given time of 8 hours or 9 hours? You can do it only if you try to automate. So that is where they focus on people who give importance to automation. So they don't want just to tell, hey, I know this, I know another side. No, they expect you, if I give you a problem, are you ready to solve? And can you automate by reducing the time? So that is what the major focus is. Okay. Now comes the next point. Okay, you are being a generalist and you know how to automate, but what is that you are going to automate? Because every one of us are not experts in everything. So that is where in DevOps, there is something called as best practice. Okay. So if you know cooking, there is a best way of doing cooking. You know washing, there is a best way of doing washing. So that way, for different problems, there is a best practice available, and company expects you to know. Only if you know, you will be able to do automation. Okay. So that's where the next point you should know is what are the best practices available in SDLC, which you can adopt and using which you can do automation. Okay. Then operational excellence. What do you mean by that? Say it is like I can buy an expensive car or a bike. If I don't maintain, then the cost of that will also be higher. The same way, in the name of automation and best practice, if you try to use some tool and try to put too much of work in maintaining that tool, then again it's going to be a problem. So that is where company is not expecting you to do automation. Company is expecting you to do automation as well as maintain it better. So that way, the overall operational work, operation work means day-to-day work that you have to do should be reduced. That is the most important thing because that is how cost will be reduced. Okay. And then finally, resilience. Now, resilience is very simple. It's all about take responsibility rather than just saying that, hey, it is not my problem, I have done my work, it's up to you. Now what company is expecting, okay, can I do something or can I help so that the work will be done in a better way? So that is where they are expecting people to be in a situation where you try to solve more and more problems rather than just saying that I have done my work, I'm not going to do anything more. Because if everyone does this, product cannot be delivered at the time or the quality will not be the same. So that is where these are the things which has been expected from everyone in the name of DevOps. Okay. Now comes the next point is, okay, now you know what is the company expecting. But as I said, there are best practices to solve different problem. So this is where now in the name of DevOps, there are many best practices. Okay, so I'm not focusing on everything, but some of the important things which can be applied to each one of us. So that is where in an SDLC, there will be different people working on different problem or helping in different activity. So that is where DevOps focuses on each one of them. So if you look at this, if you're working as a developer, how can you do the development in a better way, like adopt to agile methodologies and latest development practices using which you can write code continuously? So that is where one of the best practice, what we call it as continuous development. So that it is not mandatory only a developer should do. Each and every one of us have to write some kind of code in some way. In the sense, if you're a QA engineer, you might have to write test cases, you might have to automate that test cases. You are a support engineer, you have to write some kind of script or automation to make sure your day-to-day work is better. If you're a system admin, you have to do some maintenance work. For that again, you have to write some tool or script. So that way every one of us have to develop something. So development doesn't mean that you have to write a Java program, C program. It could be developing a simple shell script or a Python script or a document is also the same. So every one of us should be aware of this process. Then, in order to improve testing, so that whenever development is complete, testing should also happen parallel and faster, there is a process called continuous testing. Okay. Now, these two are major areas where people will be working separately. But how do you connect them so that whenever the developer does his work, immediately QA should start testing? That is what we call it as continuous integration. So in this process, we will have to automate the development cycle in such a way that when a developer writes a code, immediately you take it, try to do test, and then tell if everything is okay or not. Then, is that sufficient? So that is where in the industry, it's not just sufficient for us to just tell that whatever the code which a developer has written, I can take the code and can do the test, but you should also be in a situation to deliver it. So that is where there is another process called continuous delivery which comes in, where beyond testing, you are also going to do further higher level of testing, because in the first level of testing, what you might do is just a unit test. Still, in order to do the complete functional testing, you have to automate that also and make sure your product is not good in quality, but you can also deliver it to anyone at any point of time. So such a kind of process is what we call it as continuous delivery. Again, what is deployment? Now, not every product has to be deployed. Okay, because people misunderstand that deployment is something everyone has to do. Now, if you are working in a product in which there is an environment called production environment, you need to put your application in that, and then customers are going to access, then it is called as deployment or continuous deployment. But let's assume some of the product like WhatsApp. Okay, so is it that WhatsApp is being installed in some production environment and you are accessing it? No, they are giving it into a location called App Store. You download it whenever you want, right? But take Amazon, it is a deployment because we are accessing one common site, which is nothing but the production site where the organization keeps updating the application over there. So that is where, if your business requirement has something where don't just create the product and tell that it is ready for delivery, but also deploy it. So in such a kind of organization, you might also have to go through a process called deployment. Okay, which is again one of the major area which everyone are focusing on. And until this, we are talking only about development and QA side, but supporting all this activity, you need an infrastructure. What do you mean by infrastructure? Especially people are completely aware about AWS or Azure. So you need to have a own network. You need to have some kind of security group for that. And inside that, you might need some load balancers, and then you need machines, right? So how do you get all these things by yourself? So that is where we don't keep necessarily wait for an admin to do all those things. If you can automate, then that is what we focus as infrastructure as a code. So you should be able to work in such a way, whatever the environment that you need for your development or testing or deployment, you should be able to create it by yourself and then do your development or testing or deployment work. So that is what is DevOps. So in that way, every organization is now focusing on something called as IAC, infrastructure as a code. Now, what is the next step? Okay, you have a machine created, you have the network, but inside the machine, who is going to install the application, the files that you need, the user permissions, all those things? So that is what we call it as configuration management. So typically, this is a process where you are going to automate whatever machine that you take after creating it, whatever you want is available in it. So that is where, if you are a developer, you need your development IDE or some kind of environment to do the build. If you are QA, you need some testing engine to be available that you can do some testing. If you are a support engineer, you need some applications for you to be available. And if you are more into deployment, then you will expect whatever your application, your web server, your database, all those things should be available, right? So that is where configuration management is a process where each one of us, if a machine is given, we can make sure automatically whatever we need in the machine is installed and configured. Okay, so that's how these are the best practices which an organization wants to focus. Okay, now In addition to all these things, there is something else called monitoring. So what do you mean by monitoring? Now, whether you are a developer or a QA engineer or a deployment engineer or an admin, if you follow this process, for all this process, there are many machines that you have to work on. So like I said in the previous slide, we should be taking up the responsibility not only to automate, but also to maintain. So that is where we are equally now responsible to make sure that we are automating a problem, and for that problem whatever maintenance comes we need to do, but for that maintenance we need to monitor, right? Because if you go back in the very first slide, I said that how do you reduce outage? So unless and until you don't monitor whether your machine and your application is working fine or not, you will not be able to know the problem. So that is where, to keep the outages less, it is expected that each one of us don't just automate, but also monitor the application and the machine, whatever we are responsible of. So that is how, if there is a problem, immediately we'll be able to solve that also. So these are some of the major best practices which an organization wants to adopt in the SDLC so that they can implement it as a DevOps process. Okay. So now comes the final question. How do you do that? So that is where for each of the best practice, there is a tool available. So if you talk about continuous development, so there are tools like Jira, Confluence, Agile, and tools like Git, GitLab, Bitbucket. Now all these things is what you use to do the development continuous. And same way, if you want to do more of testing work, then most popular tool you might have heard of Selenium, JUnit, or use some build automation to do all the testing work in a better way. And then if you talk about continuous delivery and continuous integration, so that is where tools like Jenkins or Cucumber, right, or Bamboo comes into the picture. So using these tools, you can make sure that you're doing the integration faster and delivery. Now, in addition, there are a couple of smaller tools like Nexus or JFrog, right? SonarQube. Now, these are the tools which helps you in doing integration and testing better. If you focus on deployment, then tools like Docker comes into the picture. So that is how, instead of doing traditional deployment, you are going to do an image-based deployment using Docker. But as you start working on Docker, there is something called orchestration of Docker, because Docker works on one machine. Now for my deployment, if I have 100 machines, so that is where you're going to get into the latest tool like Kubernetes, which will help you to manage your orchestration of Docker deployments. And further, if you move ahead into infrastructure as a code, and that's where things like Terraform will come into the picture, or if you are using completely AWS, then you will have CloudFormation. So that's where you ensure how do you make that your infrastructure is always ready. Now, along with it, if you talk about configuration management, there are tools like Chef and Puppet, but most recently Ansible is a tool which they are focusing to manage that. So that way, all of these tools are needed by a company to get a DevOps process implemented so that you get the best practices done and you achieve the goal for an organization. And all of these, once again, has to be done in a better infrastructure or a data center. So that is where we something have called as cloud computing. Okay. Now, where are you going to install all this software? Where are you going to run? So far in a company, you might be using a physical machine or a bare metal or a virtual machine like VMware. But instead of that, now they are moving to a best practice also called as cloud computing, where instead of using physical machines or VMs, you are going to use machine which is available on the cloud like AWS or Azure or GCP. Okay. So that's where it's a combination of all these things together, a company can achieve their business goal. Okay. Now comes the point where, okay, this is what company wants. Now, how do you get into this role? So that's where first we need to understand not every one of us can do automation in everything, or everyone cannot work on each and every tool that I showed you earlier. That is where in a company, people will be continuing their work. But in the name of the DevOps, they are trying to segregate some kind of role. So the first role in DevOps focuses mainly on the project management. So this will be typical mainly for people who are into product management or release management, where they have to work on the agile way. This is one of the process. The next one, the role is CI/CD, which is continuous integration and continuous delivery. Now, this is where if you are more into the development group where you are working as a developer or a QA engineer or a support engineer, you can help this. Okay. Now, tooling is something common where in some companies they will have some engineers only to write some tool and automate. They will not be even doing automation for development or testing, but in generic. Okay, so you can also be in that way where this is the role what every company is focusing, because they are giving it in so generic way that they can ask you to automate CI/CD or they can automate something on the administration side also. Okay, so this is more of generic one. But if you're more related to system administration or network administration, then there is a role called cloud administration. So that is where instead of taking care of a physical machine or a VM in your current job, if the company is moving to cloud like AWS or Azure, you need to take care of those tools. So that kind of work is what you call it as cloud administration. But a slight variation in that is also called as SRE. Now, these are the work which is available typically in some of the giants like LinkedIn, Amazon, Google, where their focus is not just to maintain their infrastructure, but ensure that it is always reliable. And that is where, in the name of SRE, you will be doing all of them. That is, you will be doing cloud administration as well as you will be doing some tooling. Okay, so you will not be focusing too much of CI/CD, but you will be doing heavily on the cloud administration and the tooling. So that is where in SRE people are expected also to write some kind of code which will help them in automation. Okay, now this is how a company can broadly classify the roles. But it is not that mandatory a company should just give. But this is how you should understand where a company needs a help in the name of DevOps. So now as you go, different role has different set of tools that you want to work. But however, the beauty of this domain called DevOps is it's not that you should be knowing only one. The more and more you know, then the career opportunity for you will be higher. So this is how I can know CI/CD and I can also do cloud administration so that it will be helpful for me so that when I go out, I can be a senior where I can help the development group as well as the administration group. The same way, if I know a little bit of coding in terms of scripting, it's better for me wherein my career will be growing. So that is where, depending on the company, the roles will be changing and tools will be changing. But now, if you want to learn, you need to first find out which side that interests you and where are you working currently, and based on that you should start focusing and learn all the tools around it. Okay, now the next point. Okay, we have been talking about roles, but how do I start working towards it? Because I am a developer, I am a QA, I am a system admin or a support engineer or a deployment engineer. Now how will I become that? So that is where you need to first know is, in your work you need to first automate. Because if you go back in the best practice, there will be at least one best practice which will be directly applicable to your work. If you are in a dev, focus on continuous development. If you are a QA, focus on testing or CI/CD. If you are a support engineer, you can also focus on CI/CD so that it will help you to deliver faster. If you are a administrator, you can focus on infrastructure as a code or configuration management or monitoring. So that way, each one of us can apply any one of the best practice directly in our work. So that is how start automating. Now, when you automate, you will know that you are not just automating, but applying a best practice. So as soon as you apply a best practice, you have now time to do more work. So that is where you need to now know what are the additional things that you can take care which is related to your current work. Okay, so that way you can start doing the cross training. So cross training means don't just focus on only your current role and automate. Think what are the things outside that you can do. So that is how, being in one profile, you can automate, implement the best practice in DevOps in your current job, and from there you can start taking more and more. Okay, so that way, the more and more that you know and start implementing and adding to your current profile, at the end you will be more as a DevOps engineer, where you have automated your current profile, plus you have also taken more work into your plate or more responsibility and started automating. So that is how, when you go out, you will be able to showcase your talent, saying that these are the things I have worked and automated. Okay, because typically it's not that people will just say, hey, I know this. You have to say that I have worked on this. This is how I have helped the company in achieving. So that is where, think, you have to show it in such a way that in your current profile you have done all these things. That is possible only if whatever the profile you have already chosen, you should automate, and then from there you should keep adding more and more work. Okay, so that's whole logic. So now, what are the things that you have to learn? Okay, so now let me simply split it up into two ways. So if you are more from the development group, anyone who is part of development, testing, deployment, support engineer, right, wherein you are not doing hardcore system administration or network administration, then the path for you is this. Okay, so you need to first understand Linux and have some kind of basic scripting knowledge, and from there on, try to implement these process in SDLC. So first understand CI/CD, and that is continuous integration and delivery. And focusing next, you need to understand deployment, infrastructure as a code. And as you move forward, then you can also learn administration in the cloud, because unless and until you don't do it, getting into cloud will not be easy for you. So that is where you can learn any one of the cloud like AWS or Azure and start administrating. Plus, you can also focus on Python. So Python is again a plus in the market, because that is purely needed for automation. So this is how, any one of you who are majorly working towards development group, or if you're not too depth or not interested much into the administration side, then this is what you're going to do. Suppose if you are more into administration side, now this is where next problem comes. Okay, I want to learn cloud, but which one to learn? So that is your choice, because now market is quite wide. That's where earlier only AWS was there, but now Azure is also coming. But preferably, what I would say is, if you're focusing more on customers who are working on Linux, okay, then focus on AWS. If you are working or interested in companies who work majorly on Microsoft products, then you focus on Azure, like Windows. So that is where, if you want to get into AWS, then you need to first understand as a developer how things work, and then try to understand the services, provide a solution for that as a solution architect. Or you can be a complete or a pure system admin on AWS. That is what we call it as SysOps. Further, you can also get certified as a complete solution architect or a DevOps engineer in AWS, where you are not going to use any of the open source tools, because AWS also have a replacement of all the tools what we have. So that way you can start using that. In the same way, if you want to get into Azure, again there also, are you a developer who are using Microsoft services, then you can get a certificate in that or learn those things. Or if you want to become more of an administrator on Azure services, then you can learn this. Okay, but again, if you want to be more as an architect, then you can get into security as well as solution architect on Azure. But further, like AWS, Azure also have their own set of tools replacing all the open source tools for DevOps. So that is where you're going to learn more of things called as Azure DevOps. Okay, so this is how you need to first understand what is your current role. Okay, and then what is your interest in moving to DevOps, and in that, go back and understand what are the tools that you have to learn, where to start, and what is the goal. But finally, understand this. There is no limitation saying that you want to learn, then only a role will be feasible for you, because go back and start comparing. So now the better opportunity is, the more you learn, the more responsibility that you take on the development side as well as on the administration group side or operation group side, the profile would be quite bigger, and that is where you will be matching different roles in a organization. So that's where in DevOps, the more you know, the more profiles or the roles you will be able to match, and that's where directly proportional to your salary or career growth. So don't ever compare to someone saying that, hey, how did he get into this much of salary? It's because of one thing: the person knows many best practices, and the person is ready to automate many things by which he knows lot of tools and scripting, and he's ready to solve the problem. So that's how in DevOps the growth happens. Okay. Anyway, by saying this, I'll stop, but I'm open for questions.